helpful. And I'm going to take you through what's in our maths reports, what our assessments look like, and really share with you where I think that Brightpath might provide an assessment that you find valuable. Paul Swan very kindly posted information about this event on his Facebook page. So I know many of you have come through Paul Swan. We work closely with Paul to support. We know that we can provide very good maths assessments, but it's the really important what you do with the data afterwards, where Paul and Narelle step in and support schools. So, thought we would start with why use Brightpath. Just have an exploration about sort of what we know about Brightpath. We get constant feedback. So we have about 800 schools now using Brightpath to assess both writing and mathematics. The feedback that we get is that schools really like the fact that they have a tool that they can use to monitor students and do something with the results afterwards. So the quote on the left, we now have a tool to continuously monitor our students. We know what to do immediately after we have the results. That's really quite typical of the information or the feedback that we get from schools. I'm going to talk about one of the maths reports that we provide now, just to sort of trigger your thinking into whether Brightpath is going to be a tool that you're going to find valuable. In that image there, you can see that we have a question that was on our test. So the question's very similar to the kinds of questions that you would get on a NAPLAN test. Which one of the angles in the drawing below is closest to the size of a right angle. This is the report that you look at as a teacher after your students have completed the assessments. So we show you what the correct answer is, and then we tell you the students who got it correct, the students who got it incorrect, and importantly, the important thing that we show you in Brightpath are the students who got this question correct, got that incorrect, but actually it's in their zone of development. This is the next thing that they need to be learning if they're going to be making progress. Sometimes those focus questions in the example, such as this one, might be sort of more content knowledge, and it requires just some very targeted teaching. Other times you can see a trend over your focus questions that there's a conceptual misunderstanding or less developed learning happening in your students. So you might pick up over a number of questions that have been flagged as focus questions that your students are struggling with place value. I want you to hold on to that image because that's really central to what we're providing in the Brightpath reports. We do know from our writing, so Brightpath writing assessments have been around since 2015, and we know from extensive research that the way we are showing you data and providing you feedback leads to improved student learning. So in 2018, the WA Education Department commissioned research to examine the impact of Brightpath on students' NAPLAN writing performances. And they found and concluded that students in high usage Brightpath schools progressed substantially more than students in schools not using Brightpath. Now that's coming from, not from doing more testing, but I think from the way that we're providing the data that speaks to you as a teacher and that gives you the information to act upon that data. We know that weighing a pig doesn't fatten it, it's what you feed the pig that makes the difference. So we've really done a lot of work to try and ensure that we're providing you data that means that you can act upon it straight away. We have set up the software so that it's very easy for you to use, very easy for you to get in and give your students the test. We've worked hard to keep it looking as engaging as possible with images and context that your students will find interesting. And then we've made it so that there are all these reports that you can access. So the one lovely quote that we got was, Brightpath Maths Assessments is the gift that keeps giving. I'm grateful for the clarity that the program offers. The Brightpath teacher resources are excellent and really help in guiding teachers to use the program. To give you a sense of sort of how we're going within the Australian market, you can see that we are being used across the whole of Australia now and across all three sectors. So that's really heartening. The statistic I like to look at is not only that we've had, since we started our first year of starting with 92 schools, we've had a 750% increase in the use of Brightpath. So that's very heartening. The statistic I find really heartening is that the schools that are using Brightpath are using it more often. So we've had a 2000% increase in the number of assessments being completed in the platform. So now focusing on the maths assessments. Your students complete their tests online, and the program is analysing their work as they are working through the tests. That has the advantage that we can give you the results immediately afterwards. So as soon as you've completed the test, you can see the results and students can log back in and see their results. I'll tell you a little bit more about that shortly. The other advantage of us being able to analyse their work as students are completing the results is that we can look for when we think that they're not going to get any more questions right. And we can say, you've done really well, you can stop now. That allows us to provide longer tests. So they're about the same length as the NAPLAN tests. And that's important because that gives us really good measurement information about where your students are in their learning. But we can, those students that are really sort of starting to fall away, we can say at a point, you can stop now. So really important. Our assessments cover years 2 to year 9. And the ones that you can access now are number and algebra and measurement and geometry. We're just finalising all the development work on a combined or general mathematics set of assessments and the stats and probability assessments. And we'll be taking those to trial in term 3 so that they're ready for schools to use the start of next year. There are numerous tests that teachers can use throughout the year, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Crystal, you've asked how long between tests. That's really driven by you as a teacher. You have complete control. You can decide how often you want to administer the tests. We have lots of tests so that you can test your kids, teach to their point of need, use their data and reflect on their data, test them again and see how much progress there's made. And that has the really important benefit that students get second chances of success. So it's not that they see they couldn't get it right and then you just move on to new things. They have a chance to come back and demonstrate that they've now learned the concepts that you've been teaching them. So we've structured the tests so that they come in pairs of years. So year 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we've split 6 and 7 because it's a bit complex with some students in primary, some in secondary. And then we've got a pair 8, 9. Now, in each of those instances, we have 6 number and algebra and 3 measurement and geometry tests. So there are a lot of tests for you to choose from. Like NAPLAN, the tests are assessing a broad range of ability. So in any of these years, the tests will have some easy items which might be coming from curriculum lower than the target year level, and some harder items that are coming from skills described in the curriculum at a higher year level. All the tests are equated, and so all the number and algebra tests are equated, all the measurement and geometry tests are equated. The students don't know what the target year level of the test is that you're giving them. So as a teacher, you can say, I'm a year 4, 5 teacher, I've got some weak kids, I can move them on to the 2, 3 test. My stronger kids, I can move on to the year 6 test. They don't know that they're getting a different target test. Because the tests are equated, all the data comes back onto the same scale. I think I saw a comment flash up about the questions being read aloud. Yes, we do have the questions read aloud. Thanks, Sabina. And we've followed all NAPLAN protocols in terms of what's read out and what's not read out. So just to give you sort of the overview of what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about the reports first, because obviously if the data is useful, then the testing's worthwhile. And then about the types of questions, and then very briefly about the mechanics of the software. But you're going to find the software very easy to use. So in terms of the reports, if you could be thinking about, you know how in education we talk about assessment for learning, assessment of learning, or formative assessment, summative assessment, we're covering the full range of purposes of assessment in the reports that we give you. So we have a set of reports that are about very much formative assessment. So it's data that you can use to inform your teaching and data you can use as feedback to students. Then we have a range of reports that are looking at the summative purposes of performance, so allowing you to look at whole school data and also supporting you with reporting to parents, and for those systems that report with grades, we provide some support in that regard. And then a really important aspect of what we're doing is allowing you to track student growth over time and measure and evaluate student growth and learning so that you can see whether your teaching's been effective. Have I actually hit the mark with my teaching? So that's a really important aspect of the service we provide within Brightpath. So in terms of the questions, the formative question for you, or formative assessment for you as a teacher. This is the report you get as soon as you've ended the test for your students. So down the bottom, the ribbon of numbers at the bottom are the question numbers. So every time you click on the question, a number, it takes you to that question. You can see what the question was. You can see what the correct answer was. On the right, you can see what was the skill that was being assessed by the question, and that's really important. That's going to help you think about what you need to teach your students if they're to be able to answer this question correctly next time. Then we show you the students who got the question correct, the students who got it incorrect, and for a range of students, we'll be able to show you they got this question incorrect, but it's a focus question. It's within their zone of development. So these are the questions that are commonly wrong, but they're the next skills. We can see it's the next skills that your students are ready to learn. It's not too hard for them. It's right at the point of their need. And just to give you a sort of a little schematic of where we're getting these focus questions correct. And some of you will have studied with Steve Humphrey and myself at UWA, and you'll know that we use this as an example to explain an important part of test development. So this is a little score sheet of how students went on the test. Tim's our weakest student because he only got one question right. Claire's our most able student because she got 5 questions right. Question 1 is our easiest question because all our students got it right. Question 2 actually turns out to be our hardest question because only one student got it right. What we're looking for when we're analysing and working out the focus questions is the point at which students are getting some questions right and wrong. So Matt's zone of development is around the skills being assessed by questions 5 and 4. So he can do addition of 2 numbers with no carrying. He can't yet do addition of 2 numbers with carrying. So that's just to give you just a very schematic, very crude way of saying how we're looking for the zone of proximal development for your students. So there's some very detailed analysis happening in the background to allow us to identify the sort of where your students, the point at which they're falling away from the test, and it's the next skills that they need to learn. When you're in your reports, it's so important that you can always get back to and see an individual student score. Those of you who follow Lynn Sharrett and Fullen's work will know their book, Putting Faces on the Data. This is key to what we're doing. So in this report, it's a plot of where every child scored on the report. You can see the Brightpath scale in the middle. Each little block is a student, and we have their initials. Each color represents a different year level. When you click on a student, you're taken back to see their actual performance. So if I click on FB, who got a score of 325, I'm taken back. I can see their test paper. I can see exactly what they did. That gives me the background to then interpret the data in this report. So sort of a summary level data in the report. I go back to the detail of the individual student. I go back to the face of the student. So very important. as I mentioned, as soon as your students have finished the test, they can log back in and see how they went on the test. And this is what the report now looks for them. So the same concept, their questions are numbered down the bottom. As they click on each number, it opens up the individual question. They can see the question that they got right. And down the bottom, the greens are the questions they got right. The reds are the questions they got wrong. And the orange ones are their zone of proximal development. So for this student, Kaylee, this student is looking at the first question, I think it's question 4. Kaylee got that correct, and we tell Kaylee, good work. Now we look at question 5. Now that's quite an easy question. Have a look. Kaylee, the questions are all ordered very strictly from easiest question to hardest question. So Kaylee's gone on and got question 17 and 18 right, even question 24 and 25 right. So this is really quite an easy question, given Kaylee's ability. So we prompted the student to think about this and say, did you make a mistake? And then, you most probably could get this right with a bit more practice. So we tuning them into, did you make a silly mistake? Just think about it. You most probably can get this question right. Whereas a harder question is, but then that's what it would look like for you as a teacher. We would say in this example, Faith most probably could get this question right. When we get to a harder question, so now we're coming to the end of, this is another student. So this is Faith still. Faith got question 11 wrong. Can you see this is the point at which Faith is now falling away from the test? So this is where we tell Faith, you might need to do more work like this before you can get it right. A much harder question, we would say to Faith, you might need more teaching from your teacher before you can get this question right. And for something like question 42 and 45, where actually they've got a lot of questions wrong before they've got these ones right, we say to you as a teacher, actually Faith might have guessed this answer. So we're able to try and sort of say, we think there's some lucky guessing happening here. We obviously don't say that to the student. It's for you as a teacher to decide if they did just jag it. So in terms of the more generic reports that we provide, as soon as your students have finished their test, you get this list of the students and their Brightpath score. Now the Brightpath score is like the NAPLAN score. It's a different scale. So you can't do a direct comparison. 260 on the Brightpath score doesn't mean 260 on the NAPLAN score, but it's the same. We derive the scale in a very similar way, and the scale values start to really hold meaning over time. And I'll explain that in some of the reports. We do, for number and algebra and measurement and geometry, we do provide you with a NAPLAN equivalent score. So it's like going from centigrade to Fahrenheit. So you could see what the student's score is, a Brightpath score, and then you can filter down and see what their NAPLAN score would be. We also do, for number and algebra, provide a grade. Measurement and geometry, we're just finalizing our analysis now so that we can provide you measurement and geometry grades. So still staying within the formative information of the reports, as I described earlier, you've got the Brightpath scale in the middle. Your students are plotted on the scale. You can see their initials, and each color represents a different year level. To the left, we describe the skills generally associated with this range of performance. So we can't say definitely that SB at 320 can demonstrate all these skills and answer all questions that are assessing these skills, but it's pretty good indicative information that these are the things that SB can do. We then flip that information and show this report in another way to then say these are the things that SB needs to learn next. Now, these documents used in conjunction with the focus questions can become a really valuable starting point for your teaching. They're also documents, I'm very mindful of how busy teachers are. And if we can be giving you work that's going to save you time, it's just such an important bonus. I would be using these documents to inform your scope and sequence documents in your school, report comments, feedback to students, and so on. Any way that you can be using this information to save you time is important. So this is where we now focus on, based on where your students are on the scale, these are the skills that they need to learn next. And so, of course, this now starts saving you a lot of time with your planning and sort of all the work you need to do around lesson planning, differentiation, and so on. We bring it together to save you time. We bring it together in a single report, where on the left you have the performance descriptors for that score range. On the right, you have the teaching points, and then you can see your students' initials. So, you know, just do what you need to do to save time, copy and paste, and so on. Yes, Rene, there is a report to show parents. I think we've got an image here. Oh, maybe we didn't put one in, but Rene, we provide a report that's very similar to the report that goes out to parents after NAPLAN. So it's something that you could either use in parent-teacher interviews, and if you are doing it in parent-teacher interviews and viewing it online, you can click on the student and open up their test paper, so you can show the teachers, the parents, how the students went on each question, or you can print it off and send it home to be part of your end of semester report or part of sort of continuous reporting to parents. Obviously, we've all followed John Hattie's work for quite some time and know the importance of checking that students are making adequate growth over time. This is a report that shows you the students' progress on the number and algebra scale. So the two pink plots are where they were tested when they were in year 2, the green are where they were tested in year 3. The data follows the student over time. So for some schools that have been testing using Brightpath for a while, they have quite a number of years of data and can monitor individual student growth over time. We also do provide a pre and post test report. So in this report, I'll describe on the lower axis is the first time the students were tested. So this is the distribution of the students the first time they were tested. On the upper axis is the distribution the second time they were tested. So when they're making progress, we want them to see them moving obviously higher up the scale, so to the right. We also then provide you the pre-test and post-test means and effect size. And for every individual student, we provide you their pre-test score, their post-test score, and how much they've improved over time. Not all students do improve, and so it's really important to know that sometimes students do go backwards for a whole variety of reasons. As I mentioned, we'd also provide a whole suite of reports that allow you to evaluate whole school performance. So in this display, what we're looking at is the distribution of students at each year level. So pink's the distribution of year 2s, green the distribution of year 3s, and so on. We know this, but the data is really valuable in helping you view sort of the spread of ability at a year level, as well as the overlap of ability across year levels. So allows school leaders and everyone in the school to start to get a really good picture of whole school data. And then, of course, we also provide you with examples of how your school went relative to the all schools. We don't do similar schools. Our database is a moving database. Everybody's assessing at different times. Providing similar school comparisons just isn't possible. Perhaps further down the track, we will be able to provide that kind of information. And then, of course, they're all the points of reference. So you can start to look at mean scores at each year level, look at what the mean scores are in term 2, what they are in year 4, and start to really build up a really good understanding of what's happening in students' development in maths learning. And importantly, you can link the score back to the skills that were assessed. So we're always taking you from a number back to a description of the skill that was being assessed, back to an actual test paper. So these numbers aren't abstract. You know what they mean in the context of your learning programs. So here, just a sample of our questions, and you'll see we've tried to keep the images as engaging as possible. We have tried to, if a context is, so maths tests are full of students buying books and pens, which, you know, when I was looking at all the questions that were coming through from our expert team, I was losing the will to live. So we mixed it up a bit, and we really have tried to provide more engaging contexts for the questions. Where we think there might be a vocabulary issue, we've used an illustration, and then, as we've said, the questions can be read out. Now, these questions are set up in a very similar way to NAPLAN. And not all life is about preparing for NAPLAN tests. This way of assessing mathematics is, has both people who really like it, people who feel that it's problematic that we don't do more sort of naked number testing. We took the decision that we would keep it as problem solving within a context, and to do that, we obviously need words. And there's an element of comprehension of what the question's asking you. So at the end of the presentation, I will talk a little bit more about the work that Paul Swan and Narelle Rice are doing around helping teachers understand the comprehension needed to process what the question's asking, so that they're well placed to then work with their students on that. But it's a really valuable way of thinking about how you're making sure your students are ready for NAPLAN. And this becomes, I think, important because with testing moving to March next year, you're really needing to do this work with your year 2s, 4s and 6s and 8s pretty early on. And examples of our measurement and geometry items. So stuff that you will have seen around typical, it's, you know, what we're doing is providing typical maths problem solving multiple choice questions. I'll just flip through some other examples so you've got a sense of what we have. So there, in that example on the right, sorry, the screen grab from the actual test has distorted how the image is looking. But rather than talking about buying books, we spoke about buying pinwheels, and we've got an illustration of the pinwheel. The mechanics is really straightforward. So for schools already using Brightpath, WA schools, you've got access to the maths tests. You just need to, in our knowledge base, you'll find the instructions for setting up a maths test, but you're good to go. And they're really 4 simple steps. You select your learning area that you want to assess, then you assess, then you select your class, and, you select which aspect of maths you want to assess. Then you have a chance to preview all the tests and select which test you want to use. Then you select your students and you open up the testing ready for students. Students go online and you have a participation code. You give them the participation code. They fill in, they select their name and give their date of birth, and then they're good to go. So it really is quite straightforward. Before I go on to this, Sabina, are there any questions you wanted me to talk to?
There have been no further questions raised. No.
Okay. Anybody want to ask me questions and unmute yourself now? I'm really happy to talk to all aspects of our work. You can see I've read the books on the importance of wait time. It kills me.
I will stop the recording now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Stop the recording and we can discuss questions. Are there any questions? Any concerns?